Unforgiving, a northern hymn, is made by Swedish developer Angry Demon Studio. It's a first-person survival horror which is heavily inspired by Swedish folklore and Norse mythology. If you haven't seen my previous video looking at Norwegian folklore-inspired horror, Through the Woods, then maybe watch it before this video. Skoll is the name of the wolf who follows the shining priest into the desolate forest, and the other is Hati, Rovitnir's son, who chases the bright bride of the sky. Although it's not necessary at all, there are many characters and themes I couldn't include in my last video, which also appear in this game, so I may be referencing that video occasionally. What I find interesting about these games is the different interpretation of Scandinavian tales. There's one creature that features prominently in both this game and Through the Woods, but they differ as one is the Norwegian version and one is the Swedish version of the same folktale. The creature Skogsrå in this game is the same creature as the Huldra in Through the Woods, but I'll talk more about that creature later. For now, let's take a look at the creatures and lore of Unforgiving, a northern hymn.
Hello there, Lucas. Hey.
Before we dive into the lore, I'll get you up to speed with the story and our protagonist, Linn. We start the game with Linn waking up tied up in the back of a car. There's a man driving the car, talking on his phone. Linn kicks him in the head and causes him to crash into a river. When they are back on land, it is revealed that the man is Linn's brother, Lukas, who was trying to help Linn with her drug addiction after refusing treatment. I'm not going to talk about how tying someone up and stuffing them in the back of a car is very questionable behaviour, so let's move on. The two now have to find their way through the woods next to the river. Obviously it doesn't take long before things go wrong. There are many threads to this game's story. A lot of it takes place before our protagonist's arrival. Some of it takes place on another world, but this is all you need to know for now, and we'll look at the larger story later. The Irrbloss, or the Lichtgubbe, are invisible creatures that appear as an orb of light, which are seen on moors, bogs, and in marshes. They are similar to Will-o'-the-Wisp in English folklore. They can only be seen during nightfall because of the light they carry with them. They are often evil creatures who lure their victims into the mire to drown. Those people then in turn become Irrbloss themselves, forever patrolling their watery grave, trying to warn people of the danger, or leading them to their doom. I actually missed these creatures on my first playthrough. It wasn't until I found a poem later in the game that I went back to find them. Beware of the light that stalks in the night, gleams in the mist and the gloom. It'll twist truth to lies, you can't trust your own eyes, by your own hand brought to your doom. Giants, or Jättar in Swedish, are creatures who are as old as time and appear in many various shapes and forms, and in many cultures other than Scandinavian ones. In Irish mythology, there is Balor of the Evil Eye. In Japanese folklore, there are the Oni, and in Greek mythology there are many giants, including Polyphemus, Orion, and Atlas. We find a page in a book entitled The Living Mountain. It describes how these enormous creatures can be mistaken for mountains, but if you look closer, on occasion they open their eyes to reveal the mountain is actually a living creature. One of the creatures I left out of my Through the Woods video could have also matched this description, although that could have just been a big troll. We find a poem in the game, Bergsjättar. For eons they sleep, in the ground, in the deep, colossi immense and forsaken. Beware of valleys and peaks, of the countryside bleak, for soon they will stir and awaken. Unforgiven's giant isn't an entire rocky mountain, it's just a regular giant. He has a taste for human flesh, and he seems to have been recently wounded by something. There's also a poem about the Jätten. Tread lightly, my friend, or you will meet your end, for when the ground shake, it's too late. He will feast on your flesh, with a quick simple thresh, a bloody death will be your grim fate. Freyja is famous for her fondness of love, fertility, beauty, and fine material possessions. And because of this, she's considered to be something of a party girl of the Aesir.
I can talk the back legs off a donkey.
She often rides a chariot pulled by 2 cats. A painting we see in the game depicts Freyja with her 2 cats. They are lynxes, presumably because the developers are Swedish. It's worth noting the 2 ravens that fly above her, as they likely belong to Odin. Their names are Hugin and Munin, and they fly daily across the entire world, Midgard. The villagers worship Freyja, and we can see the ones who don't are clawed away by the darkness. The painting is loosely inspired by the works of John Bauer. The backstory to the game is found in books scattered around the forest and mines. I also used the game's art book to help me piece bits together. Long ago, the goddess Freyja was gifted a magic relic by the dwarves. Being creatures born of earth, their magic was strong, and while they had sway over rock and soil, they could not create life. They looked upon the barren land and felt something was missing. So, they constructed a great harp with gold from their mountains and ashwood from the tree Yggdrasil. They inlaid it with holy runes, so the mighty magic of the goddess could flow through the instrument. Freyja accepted their gift, and in order to bestow upon the harp its magic powers, the dwarves strung the harp with the goddess's very own golden hair. Freyja caressed the strings, and as the music flowed over the barren lands, life sprung forward across the world. However, the melody also awoke some things that should have been left sleeping. Deep beneath the earth, a vile, evil being, an ancient trickster with a heart of pure black, stirred. The creature had been sentenced to live out its cursed existence in a prison deep within the winding halls of the mountain. It heard the lovely music and arose from his deep sleep. He stumbled down the slopes of the mountain that had held him for so long, and saw Freyja play life into the earth. Stunned by her beauty, he fell deeply in love with the goddess that had freed him from his wretched life of frost and shadow, and vowed to claim her as his own. The creature would sit in the sunshine, by the streams of the mountains, and play his violin to the forest around him. The forest and the stone fell in love with the sweet melodies he played. Creatures of tree and earth awoke and would creep closer to hear him play. They fell into rapture from his music. A lovely tree spirit fell deeply in love with the creature, and even offered him bark from her own back, so that he could make more instruments to play his sweet music for her. The creature rejected her, having only eyes for his beautiful saviour, the goddess Freyja. But the tree spirit could not be free of his hold over her. In this realm, the gods held a banquet once a year at their great hall, and all the creatures of the land were invited to dine with them. The creature saw his chance. He would use this opportunity to present his love for his beloved Freyja. He disguised his appearance, for an eternity under the mountain had made him pale and misshapen. Once at the banquet, when it was his turn to greet the gods, he put his bow to the strings and began to play his violin for Freyja. The common folk began to sway to the melody in ecstasy of the sweet music. Freyja showed no interest. She picked up her golden harp and played a song so exquisite that the crowds paid no more attention to the violin music. Rejected and ridiculed by the one he yearned for, his love turned to vicious and bitter hatred.
Jag försökte rädda henne. Ja. Har du sett henne?
The tree people, or the Trädfolket, are unique creatures in Unforgiving. They were once human natives of the village. A beautiful woman, the Skogsrå, lured the villagers one by one into the forest where they were never seen again. Those that managed to escape back to the village would have been bitten by the woman. The bite would leave the victim with an infection which would slowly turn their flesh and veins into bark. They would spend the rest of their days in isolation, as the other villagers feared the unknown disease. Eventually, the victims would turn into a tree, their souls forever trapped within. The Trädfolket remain in a dreamlike state, yet they can sense the world and time passing by them. Isolation causes the unfortunate souls to lose their sanity, leaving them trapped in an infinite nightmare. There is a book in the game which talks of the cursed bite. When she has given her sharp kiss, the poison spreads in the bloodstream and rots the soul, twisting one's bones so they sink into the earth. At last you transform into an unholy tree, forget who you are, and become hers forever. The tree people were created for Unforgiving, a northern hymn, and do not come from any folk tale. They were inspired by a tale the developers heard as children. The tale was about the curse of Skogsrå, where when you look into the hole in her back, you turn into a tree. When researching the game, the developers were never able to find the tale documented anywhere. Twisted and bent, your flesh will be spent when the horror gives her vile kiss. Fixed to the ground, forever there bound, a quick easy death would seem such a bliss. It's a little known fact that IKEA sources most of its wood from the Trädfolket.
Here's a song. Fucking hell! Fuck!
Linn and Lukas grew up in a Swedish town called Värnamo. Their mother got pregnant young. When Lukas was born, their father had to get a job at a plastic factory to support them. They lived in a house on the edge of the city, close to a forest. When Lukas was 7, his mother got pregnant again. His baby sister Linn was born. They had no money for toys or for video games, but they found ways to entertain themselves. During the summers, their parents would take them camping or blueberry picking in the local forests, or swimming in the lake during the summers. Their parents, Katarina and Anders, would save up money for Linn and Lukas to be able to go to summer camp. It became tradition. Both children started going to camp every summer from the age of 8 until they turned 16. The family spent many happy years in that house at the edge of a forest. When Lukas was 16, Katarina decided to go back to school to study to become a nurse. Anders picked up extra shifts at the factory to make ends meet. Lukas was old enough to take care of himself and even started helping out with taking care of Linn. A year passed this way, of Lukas taking care of his little sister, of Katarina studying, and Anders working extra shifts to cover the money. 3 months into Katarina's second year at nursing school, the fighting began. Lukas gave Linn his Walkman so that she could plug in his earphones and listen to music, instead of their parents' failing marriage. From then on, Linn would put on music to drown out the sound of her mother and father screaming at each other, to block out the insults and the slurs. When Lukas was 17 and Linn was 10, Anders left Katarina. He had found a new girlfriend, one that wasn't away all the time. The two of them were moving out of town, away with her kids. Lukas decided to get a job and postpone his high school graduation for 2 years so that his mother could finish college. She told him that he didn't need to, but Lukas insisted, saying he was tired of school and needed a break. Katerina knew it was a lie. With Lukas and her mother gone all the time, Linn was left mostly by herself. When Lukas was 20, Katerina met a new man. She had graduated from nursing school and had gotten a job at the local hospital where she met Carl. She got pregnant and Carl moved into the house with them. When Lukas was 22 and Linn was 15, their half-sister Maylin was born.
As I mentioned before, the beings in Scandinavian folklore are often different from country to country, although there are usually some similar traits that connect them. A hulder is a seductive forest creature found in Scandinavian folklore. In Swedish folklore, she is known as Talemaja, Pine Tree Mary, or Skogsrå, Forest Spirit, which is the version we'll be looking at. The recurrent characteristics of this fairy tale woman are her nature and appearance, portraying her as a beautiful woman and the queen and guardian of the woods. It appears in the form of a small beautiful woman who lives deep in the forest with a seemingly friendly temperament unless angered. However, her anger can be swayed if one were to offer her gifts. The hunters often put some of their supplies by the root of the biggest tree they can find as an offering to her. In some stories, she can even get so pleased with the offering that she helps the hunters and sometimes falls in love with them. It was often said that men would fall in love with her and her beauty, and she would lead them into the woods, never to be seen again. However, her hollow back made of bark would reveal who she really was. Depictions of Skogsrå vary a lot depending on where in Sweden you are. She is sometimes described as having a tail of a fox or a cow. In Unforgiving, the Skogsrå has lost her charm, and her usually strong wooden body has started to rot. Branches are grown out of her head, like antlers, creating a crown for the queen of the forest. Some fairy tales say that the hole in her back was cursed, and if you would look into it, you would transform into a tree. In Unforgiving, they decided to make their own interpretation of this story, and make her bite the means through which the tree curse spreads. Wild and fair, with silken hair, she'll instill your heart with fear. There's no way to fight that venomous bite, your blood will rot as end draws near.
What have you done? Fell off your chair. I keep trying to fucking shut the door. Grab my guitar, please.
Right, I've got it.